Hello. Thanks for joining me, all you YouTube user lovers out there. This is another edition of Electric Avenue's YouTube updates. We're on January 13th, 2023, about halfway through the month already. Crazy. So, happy 2023 if you haven't watched the previous videos, and thanks for joining me. So last week was a very big week as far as Rhino Records did a whole Start Your Ear Off campaign of new releases for the year, and there were quite a few things that came out. I would watch that video if you want to reference sort of what was there, but maybe 10, a dozen pretty high-profile titles, everything from Otis Redding to Warren Zevon to Dire Straits. Quite a expansive sort of variety. And so this week, oddly, there's not a whole lot of new releases as far as new artists. Again, there's a lot of reissues, but there is a fair amount of stuff. So I'll get to that here. And first of all, let me just say rest in peace, Jeff Beck. That was sort of a sudden tragedy, and it does not sound like what he had was something that had built over time. It was some form of bacterial meningitis. So terrible. And I know a lot of guitar fans out there are pretty broken up today over that. So hence my Roger the Engineer Yardbirds here paying homage. So on that note, let's get started with some of the new releases for this week. So Verve Records has sort of started a couple of series here. Well, they have different series going, and this series is called the Verve by Request series. And these were items that were postponed from the fall that are finally making it out, and they're pressed at Third Man Records, no less. So you can probably be mostly guaranteed that the pressings are quite good. But the first one up here is James Brown, Soul on Top. This is an album that James did with the Louis Bellson Orchestra and Oliver Nelson conducting, 1970. So I guess you could call this mid-period James, although it's really sort of late considering all the stuff he had done prior to this. Early if you throw in Living in America or something like that. But anyway, on this he does a lot of sort of cover songs and reworkings of some of his songs and other people's songs with a more sort of orchestral, and it has kind of a I don't know, more melodic sort of sound than he usually does. I mean, he sort of is still James. He can't sort of help being James, but the music is much more kind of lush, and because this is not the band element, but he does versions here of "It's a Man's World," "Papa's Got a Brand New Bag," and then things like "For Once in My Life," "September Song," "Your Cheating Heart," "That's My Desire." So I think that that's going to be a pretty popular release, because it's a record that hasn't really been paid attention to much in the reissue world. The same thing would go for this record. Another Brown, Mel Brown, "Chicken Fat." I'm not sure that Mel and James are necessarily related. They just happen to have the same last name that I know of. Interesting, this record was produced by Bob Thiele, who some people out there might know from locals, or not local, but know the name from the producer, being sort of renowned. But anyway, this album features "Chicken Fat," "I'm Going to Jackson," "Hobo Flats," "Greasy Spoon," "Blues for Big Bob." It's kind of a hybrid record in a way. It sort of straddles the line of soul, funk, jazz. There's a lot of like solo guitar, kind of blues guitar stuff, and organ stuff. I started listening to a little bit of it. It reminded me sort of like music that you would have heard maybe in the background during a heist scene on Ocean's 11 or something like that, but or a Quentin Tarantino film. But both of those are pressed by Third Man. And another jazz release this week, which we got very limited copies of. Bethlehem Records continue their series with Charles Mingus, East Coasting by Charlie Mingus. This is from 1957. It does feature Bill Evans on piano. And I think they just didn't make enough of these because the demand is pretty high. But there'll probably be more pressings of it as time goes on. But yeah, Bethlehem is another record company that there have been so many jazz companies getting into the mix now. So not surprising, very popular stuff. All right. So as far as new albums this week, and this has come out already in streaming, and I don't know if, I guess you would sort of consider it a new album, but the new Kid Cudi, this is called Intergalactic, and it's sort of, it says it's connected to an animated series on Netflix, but it's still Kid Cudi, and it features Ty Dolla $ign on a couple of tracks, 2 Chainz, but most of the Kid Cudi fans out there are pretty pretty like, once they love him, they love him. So anyway, that's an album that might be of interest to hip-hop fans. I love this woman's voice, and I'm sort of excited to hear this new album, Margo Price, Strays. So Margo sort of was actually given a leg up by Jack White to get sort of her career kind of off the ground, and then she sort of moved on to other record labels. This was produced by Jonathan Wilson and Margo. He's been sort of working a lot with Father John Misty and people like that. So I think she's kind of thinking sort of outside the box on the country side of things. There are guest appearances on this album from Lucius, who have been doing a lot of stuff lately. I'm trying to remember who they were backing up. Was it maybe Brandy Carlisle, I think? And then they're their own recording duo too. Mike Campbell of Heartbreakers and Sharon Van Etten all make appearances on here. This is the limited edition indie retail purple vinyl. Another one that I think is sort of special in a way, I guess, is Rachel and Villeray. She's from Lake Street Dive, and he's just kind of a acoustic blues guitarist mainly, but or they're, I would say, I don't know, it's always acoustic, but it's sometimes an electric guitar, but he sort of they're very retro is basically what I'm trying to say. She's got a wonderful voice. I prefer this much to the Lake Street Dive stuff because I think that tries really hard to be pop at some points. It's sort of the issue that I take with Fitz and the Tantrums, where I thought they started off as a really great retro soul band and then kind of became too plasticky sounding for me. Like, just do what you do best, because that, but I assume, a lot of these people have a hard time getting played on the radio. But anyway, this is a beautiful album, and they both have great voices, but she just has a fantastic voice, I think. Okay, there's a new album from Circa Survive, and this is called Two Dreams, and it's on Pink Marble. They really did a kind of a nice package on this. It feels very substantial. It's a double vinyl inside, like this clear plastic wraparound that pulls off, and it has its own artwork on it. So nice. And another album that I'm not so familiar with, I'll admit, but looks interesting or sad and disturbing, depending on what you think of what's going on in the world today. Black Bears in Loving Memory, and I guess it's a little disturbing, right? Supposed to be. But this features Travis Barker on it. I don't really know, like I said, much about Black Bear, but I'm very intrigued from the cover art alone. Okay, that's pretty much it for new release vinyl this week. The rest are all reissues. So Rhino continues with their Start Your Ear Off Right campaign. Bob Weir's Ace. And this is on a translucent red vinyl, remixed by Derek Featherstone, remastered by Derek Glasser. These were a limited edition of 5,000. Which I would think some people might want because of the remix remaster element of them, but they're not. They're just a sort of thin record, not a gatefold. But there is a double CD version of this that is being released. So if that's of interest to CD buyers, the other. This is kind of a lighter week for the Start Your Ear Off Right because there were so many last week. Chicago's Greatest Hits on a picture disc vinyl, and this has sort of all of the early Chicago stuff that people want. And yes, Peter Cetera was in the band at that point. 25 or 6 to 4. Does anybody really know what time it is? Color My World, Saturday in the Park, stuff like that. So it's got all the hits, and it's kind of cool. Okay. Well, there's a couple here. Trying to think of what label these are from Real Gone Music, and they usually do very good pressings, but oh my gosh, these are sort of expensive in the $50 range. But Fountains of Wayne, Out of State Plates, this is their sort of rarities B-sides kind of collection. First time on vinyl, Junkyard Swirl pressing. So if you think of it as sort of like a record store day thing, but it's got quite a track list. R.I.P. Adam Schlesinger, who died the first year of COVID, from COVID. He was only in his early 50s, and that was tragic. And this actually features tracks number 45, Sunblock, California's Sex Lawyer. It's got Can't Get It Out of My Head, which sounds like it's probably a cover. Baby One More Time, I don't know. I Want an Alien for Christmas, and The Man in the Santa Suit, and Hanukkah Under the Stars. So you get a couple of holiday songs in there too. But 2 LPs, looks like 30 songs. So I don't know, you're getting a pretty good value there. Also, Big Bad Voodoo Daddies, the other one that Real Gone did this week. This is a 2 LP vinyl debut from a 1998 album that sparked the late 90s swing revival. Well, it certainly was there with the Brian Setzer Orchestra, and also Cherry Poppin' Daddies, who did Zoot Suit Riot. I don't remember what their big hit was. I don't know. I almost want to say, like, I wasn't really paying attention. There were so many different. The 90s were sort of weird, the late 90s. I mean, it started off with grunge, and then it sort of exploded into all these break-off sounds, whether it was hip-hop getting huge, or, big band, or techno. There was just a lot of super pop stuff. There were a lot of different genres. Anyway, this was one of the biggest albums of that era. Clear with red and yellow swirl vinyl. So I mentioned to somebody the other day, like, you aren't getting it because it's on, color vinyl, whatever. And they're like, what color is it when it's playing? Okay, yeah, I know. You can't really hear the color. Well, maybe you can. I don't know. Depends on your talent level, I suppose. This album cover, I'm only going to show a little bit of it because I don't know how much of it I can show without getting taken down. But Fela Shakara, which has a bunch of topless women on the cover. But Fela Kuti, this is pressed on pink vinyl. It comes with a bonus yellow 7-inch featuring Ezra Collective and Fela remixes. This is one of his most renowned albums, I would say. So, and they've been doing sort of boutique-y color pressings of his albums lately. Okay, so one of my favorite bands of the 80s, when I was living in the 80s, and oddly enough, I liked Bauhaus, but I wasn't necessarily a massive fan because I sort of discovered them a little late because I was a little younger than some of the people that I've been friends with who love them, and I do love them now, and I love Peter Murphy, a lot of his solo material too. But this band, I just really have a soft spot for. Love and Rockets, Seventh Dream of Teenage Heaven. This album is absolutely incredible. Finally reissued again on vinyl. I think it came out maybe 8 or 10 years ago was the last time, and then sort of disappeared. But such incredible music on here. These guys really sort of tried to break out of being tagged as simple goth people and brought in a lot of psychedelic rock and sort of that kind of 80s alternative vibe. But this album, probably most well known for the songs Haunted When the Minutes Drag, The Dog End of a Day Gone By, and If There's a Heaven Above, which are all incredible. Title track is incredible, Private Future. And the last track, which I almost don't want to pronounce, Saudade. It's a Portuguese title, but an instrumental, absolutely beautiful mix of acoustic, electric guitars, synthy orchestration. It's just great stuff. And then the follow-up album, whoa, 1986, good catch there, is Express. And this is another great album, sort of on the way to what would ultimately be their top when they hit number one or number two in the US with So Alive. I want to say maybe it was number one, but I can't remember, which was like 1989 or so. But this album, it was a little bit heavier, I guess, than Seventh Dream, a little bit maybe more rock, I guess. But All in My Mind is a great ballad. Yin and Yang, Flower Pot Man was a great alternative rock song. It Could Be Sunshine, Kundalini Express, Daniel Ash, David J., and Kevin Haskins, produced by John Fryer. Great stuff. Okay, other sort of cool reissues. This was a really big album back in the day too, in the indie circles. NoFX, So Long and Thanks for All the Shoes. And I love this Neapolitan colored cover, sort of ice cream colored, and that's the color of the vinyl as well. So if you like sort of that kind of 90s alternative, yeah, it says brown bone pink stripe is the color here. So let's see. I should have put this with the 80s stuff back there, but this might actually be, I don't know if this came out maybe more 70s, late 70s, but I think it's maybe just on the cusp. Selector, the Selector, Celebrate the Bullet. The Selector ska band, sort of the big British wave of ska music. There's a picture on the back and a track listing. This is on Chrysalis, which I believe is the label. If you've been watching the news, you probably saw that De La Soul is reissuing their album, starting with 3 Feet High and Rising, and that's coming out in March, and that has been under a legal cloud for a really long time, and originally it was on Tommy Boy Records, and that is being reissued by Chrysalis also. So interesting. Steely Span, live at the Rainbow Theater, 1974. Great folk rock band. I think a lot of people who know Steely Span love Steely Span. I think sometimes people see the name and get a little like, oh, is it Steely Dan? No. It is a little close if you sort of think about that. But anyway, they sort of do not just English folk rock, but it has kind of a historical sort of bent to it also. So very interesting. Another rock reissue of those years would be Gentle Giant, Civilian. You don't see this album as much, I don't think, in used bins and such. because I don't think it was necessarily as big of a seller as the others. And I think it came later than their sort of super popular era. But this says engineered and remixed by Jeff Emmerich. So, Gentle Giant Civilian. Get it while you can, because I don't know how long that'll be around. Speaking of Tommy Boy Records, this band was really big on Tommy Boy back in the day. And, oddly enough, they did, well, here, let me show you what it is first. Information Society, Peace and Love Incorporated. This was their third album and the final one that they did for Tommy Boy and Warner at the time. And I don't know, I feel like this album, their first album was so huge because of What's on Your Mind, Pure Energy, and all the samples of Star Trek stuff. And they sort of had a member shakeup between the first and second album, and the second album was good. It just didn't have like the massive hit single on it that they needed. And then by the third album, I think Warner was sort of losing interest. And this is actually a really good sort of pop album, but it kind of, and it had a very sort of technological side to it that kind of foreshadowed what was going on with electronic music at the time, but it just didn't catch on sales wise. The title track was really great. Anyway, so they sort of broke up, fell apart. If you ever watched Behind the Music on VH1, you saw that the band was sort of arguing. The woman who had left had had I'm trying to remember her name, but she'd had a lot of personal problems, and now she, I believe, is a member of the Psychedelic Furs touring band, had played with Dead Can Dance also for a while, and the three guys that were sort of in this band went their own ways, and the lead singer made an album that was really gothy in the 90s, and it wasn't very good, and then the guy who was sort of the technological musician genius of the band was still working, and then in the 2000s he was doing, like, I guess mostly commercial music, and the aughts he did an album with mostly a different lead singer, and brought the original lead singer back for 2 songs, and it sort of clicked. So they've made now 3 albums since then, with the most recent one coming out last year, or I guess it's been a couple years. No, it was last year. Well, 2021, but I think they were touring again. I don't know how the pandemic affected that, but I think they were on the road last year. So a band, you probably haven't thought of, some people haven't thought of Information Society in 30 years, and it's like, well, they were a band that were really popular-ish for 5 years, 7 years, and then broke up, and then 20 years later they got back together. So yeah. Or 15, 20, I guess it was at least 15 years, but things happen, people change. Anyway, it's a whole lot of Information Society. Onward and upward. Jack Kerouac, this is a 100th birthday release, Words and Jazz from the Beatnik legend. This is a tan vinyl pressing, limited to 1,000 copies. So that might be the only one I get. And then this same thing, limited to 1,000 on Milky Clear vinyl. This is the legendary 1959 album Jack Kerouac with Steve Allen, and it's Poetry for the Beat Generation. So those are kind of rarity boutique pieces you might not see for very long. Elvis, recorded at Madison Square Garden live. This is done by Music on Vinyl. And this is a limited edition of 2,500 copies on white marble vinyl. 2 LP set includes Love Me Tender, Love Me, Proud Mary, That's All Right, Heartbreak Hotel, Hound Dog, and All Shook Up. It's a pretty famous album, so this is pretty cool. Can't Help Falling in Love is on here. Suspicious Minds is on there, so it's second period Elvis, or I guess later. Mumford and Sons, Babel. I don't know. I almost want to say the less I say about this, the better, just because of all the controversy with the member that left, and he's very like vocally political now, and it's sort of annoying in a way. And then Marcus came out with a solo record that was very sort of personally, like, detailing his abuse as a child, and there's a lot going on there. So anyway, that's an anniversary issue. Same with this, a great album, XX Coexist. This was their second album, so hard to believe it's been 10 years for this already. Limited edition, clear vinyl edition. So let's see, Bob's Burgers, the movie. This is the movie soundtrack. It's the first few tracks on here seem to be something with vocal, and then there's a bunch of instrumentals. The last track is called My Butt Has a Fever. So I think that pretty much says it all. Fish Live, this is part of the live EP series that they've been doing. This is number 4. This one, actually, Radio City Music Hall, May of 2000, features the 16-minute version of Ghost on side 1 and 12 minutes of Ghost Continued on side 2. Jazz guy Makaya Raven. In the Moment is the name of this. Makaya is sort of a turntablist jazz artist, and this says nearly 48 hours of live improvised performance recorded at one venue over 12 months and 28 shows, cold cut, rendered, and remixed into 19 pieces of organic beat music. The guy's sort of a genius in a lot of ways, so that's a really cool release. And finally up here, so you can switch it off now if you want, but The Godfather Part 3 soundtrack. Yeah, I wasn't expecting to see this. This is on Music on Vinyl at the Movies series. Limited edition of 1,500 individually numbered copies on silver and black marbled vinyl, composed by Carmine Coppola and Nino Rota, including the 1991 Golden Globe nominated hit Promise Me You'll Remember, which I don't remember that song, and I saw the movie. Let's see, that was a Harry Connick Jr. song. So anyway, all right. That sort of does it. A lot of archival stuff to show, mostly archival stuff. There's a lot in January, but it is mostly archival. Next week, we should have the new Wilco, which came out back in May, but we'll finally have the vinyl. Let's see. I don't know if you'll be seeing the Rolling Stones mono box on color vinyl. It's like $500, so probably not. Unless someone orders it. Days of the New, that reissue is coming out next week, so that should be something of interest. And after that, we get the Bob Dylan, Green Day, New Order, and Elvis box sets. And then we're into February after that, which there's quite a few releases. Oh, and the one thing I didn't show today, which I'm hoping shows up in the next day or two, but they did announce a new Belle and Sebastian album just a couple days ago, premiered the video, said it's out on Friday, and the distributor hasn't had it all week to actually send it out. So I don't know if they're unable to send it until the release date, or if they just haven't been made or haven't shown up yet. But apparently it will be streaming as of Friday, so maybe physical will show up soon. But that's their second album in like 9 months, so they're getting busy because they sort of tend to work in those parameters. The last record that came out was the first full album in 7 years, but they'd had a 3-part EP out sort of in between there. So yeah, they sort of get creative with their release schedules, I guess. But looking forward to that. All right, thank you so much, guys. Have a great weekend. I seem to be running about 30 minutes every time now, so whether it's a lot or not. But I tried not to go off topic too much. I couldn't help talk about Love and Rockets and Information Society a little bit, since I don't know, people forget those bands a little bit, and that's kind of my era, I guess. So, anyway, thanks. Take care. Have a wonderful weekend. Peace.